As I pulled into the driveway after a long day at work, anticipation bubbled within me. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over our neighborhood, and all I could think about was the blissful drive I would take in my dream car. The sleek lines and polished finish of my vehicle had always made me feel a sense of pride and freedom, a symbol of my hard work and perseverance. I had saved for years to buy it, and every time I slid into the driver's seat, the world felt like it was at my fingertips. But as I walked towards the garage, a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. The silence was deafening, and the familiar sight of my car was glaringly absent. I blinked, hoping that somehow I was mistaken. Perhaps it was hidden from view, or maybe Ethan had moved it for some reason. But as I swung open the garage door, the emptiness echoed back at me like a cruel joke. My heart raced, and a cold wave of disbelief washed over me. I stood there, frozen, staring at the vacant space where my car should have been. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. My dream car was gone. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, a profound sense of loss that transcended mere material possession. It wasn't just a car, it was a piece of my identity, a tangible representation of my aspirations and the countless hours I had poured into my job. Anguish and confusion clawed at me. What could possibly justify this betrayal? The emptiness of the garage was almost suffocating, amplifying the turmoil brewing inside me. I turned on my heel and marched into the house, my mind racing with questions. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Ethan was in the living room, the television flickering softly in the background, but his casual demeanor cut deeper than any knife. How could he be so nonchalant when I was reeling from the loss of something so precious? As I approached him, I felt a storm of emotions threatening to spill over. I demanded to know what had happened, my voice barely concealing the tremor of betrayal. He looked up, and in that moment, I could see confusion in his eyes, as if he were unable to comprehend the depth of my anguish. When he finally spoke, the words tumbled out like marbles rolling off a table, clumsy and chaotic. He had sold my car, he said, to invest in Samantha's struggling store. The shock was overwhelming. I felt as if the ground had been pulled out from beneath me. Samantha, his sister, had never been kind to me. The thought that he would prioritize her financial troubles over my dreams was incomprehensible. My heart raced as anger seeped into my voice. How could he justify such a monumental decision without consulting me? Did he even consider how I would feel, or was I merely an afterthought in his mind? His insistence that this was for the family's good only fueled my fury. For whom exactly was this good? Certainly not me. I felt the walls of our marriage closing in around us, suffocating me with the weight of unspoken resentments and buried grievances. This wasn't just about the car, it was about trust, respect, and the foundations of our relationship. I was left standing there, grappling with the realization that the man I had loved and trusted had made a decision that shattered the very fabric of our partnership. That night, as silence enveloped our home, I lay in bed wide awake, the shadows dancing on the walls like phantoms of my dreams. The garage felt like a hollow shell, a cruel reminder of what I had lost. I questioned everything, my marriage, my choices, the loyalty of both Ethan and Samantha. The weight of betrayal hung heavy over me, and as I stared at the ceiling, I knew I was at a crossroads. The journey ahead would demand more than I had ever anticipated, and I felt a flicker of resolve igniting within me. I would not allow this betrayal to define me. As I stepped into Samantha's store, a wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. The bustling atmosphere felt alive with excitement, yet every cheerful face around me felt like a dagger to my heart. The bright lights and colorful displays seemed to mock my turmoil. I had come here under the guise of support, but inside, I was a storm brewing with a fierce desire to uncover the truth. I forced a smile as I walked through the aisles, pretending to be interested in the merchandise while my mind buzzed with thoughts of betrayal. The store was filled with customers, each seemingly absorbed in their shopping experience. I noticed Samantha behind the counter, her face lit up with a bright, disingenuous smile as she chatted with a familiar customer. The way she laughed, too loud, too forced, made my stomach churn. I could see her superficial charm at work, and it made me realize just how much she thrived on the attention and admiration of others. But beneath that facade, I sensed a darkness that I was desperate to expose. I had to know what was really going on in her world, one that had seemingly depended on my husband's loyalty while pushing me away. As I wandered deeper into the store, I overheard snippets of conversation that only fueled my suspicions. Customers were talking about new arrivals, sales, and even the rumored struggles of the business. I paused by a display of brightly colored scarves, my heart racing as I listened intently. A local woman, whom I recognized from the neighborhood, was sharing her concerns about Samantha's financial situation. I strained to catch every word, and when she mentioned that Samantha had been relying on Ethan for support, my heart sank further. How had I not seen this before? This woman spoke of Samantha's struggle to keep her business afloat while simultaneously pushing Ethan and me apart. It was a twisted web of manipulation, and I was caught in the middle of it. My breath quickened as I moved from aisle to aisle, absorbing every detail, every interaction. I could see the way Samantha interacted with her customers, her charm serving as a shield against any scrutiny. Yet, I knew there was something deeper lurking beneath that bright exterior. My hands trembled slightly as I traced my fingers along a row of products on the shelf, my thoughts racing. Had I truly underestimated the lengths Samantha would go to in order to maintain her facade? Then, as I turned a corner, my heart dropped. There it was, my dream car, my precious, vibrant blue coupe, displayed prominently in a corner of the store. It was parked next to a small seating area, as if it were just another piece of merchandise. The sight was a punch to my gut, leaving me breathless. I felt my emotions rage, a tempest of anger and betrayal boiling within me. Ethan had sold my car to fund this store, and now it was being showcased as part of Samantha's operation. The realization struck me like lightning. His betrayal ran deeper than I had imagined. I could hardly comprehend the magnitude of this discovery. My heart raced as I struggled to maintain my composure, feeling the weight of despair crushing down on me. How could he? How could he let her use my dream as a mere prop in her business? It was not just a car, it represented my dreams, my independence, and my trust in him. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I was not going to give Samantha or Ethan the satisfaction of seeing me break down. As I stood there, staring at the car that had once symbolized my aspirations, a resolve began to take root within me. The anger was transforming into something more powerful, a determination to reclaim not just my car, but my sense of self. I wouldn't let Samantha's manipulations dictate my life any longer. I would uncover the truth and expose the lies that had woven their way into my marriage and my dreams. With that thought anchoring me, I took a deep breath and stepped away from the display, ready to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. I would not allow myself to be used any longer. I would reclaim my voice and my destiny. The journey had just begun, and I was prepared to fight for what was rightfully mine. As I stood in the dim light of my kitchen, a sense of resolve began to replace the anger that had consumed me. The betrayal felt like a heavy cloak wrapped around my shoulders, suffocating yet igniting a fire within me. I couldn't just sit back and let Samantha's manipulations continue unchecked. She had taken something so precious from me, not just my dream car, but also my sense of trust and security in my marriage. I needed to gather evidence, to expose the web of lies that had ensnared not just me, but potentially others who might be vulnerable to her deceit. With a determined heart, I set up a makeshift workspace in the corner of our living room. My laptop flickered to life, casting a glow that felt almost like a beacon of hope. I began to scour the internet, searching for any information I could find about Samantha's store. My fingers flew across the keyboard, typing furiously as I pulled up articles, reviews, and financial statements. Each piece of information painted a clearer picture of a business that was not just struggling, but one built on a foundation of half-truths and manipulative tactics. I meticulously documented every shady practice I uncovered. There were customer complaints about subpar products, allegations of false advertising, and whispers of her never-ending cycle of debt. My heart raced as I gathered screenshots and saved links, piecing together a narrative that I hoped would serve as a lifeline for those who had been misled. I even reached out to some disgruntled customers, who shared their own horror stories about their experiences with Samantha. With each revelation, the anger I felt morphed into a fierce determination, propelling me forward in my quest for justice. As I worked late into the night, I reached out to friends and family, sharing my story and warning them about Samantha's tactics. The more I spoke, the more I realized how many people had been affected by her behavior. Their responses were overwhelmingly supportive, rekindling a sense of self-worth that Samantha had tried to strip away. I felt a renewed sense of community, as if I were no longer isolated in my pain but surrounded by a network of allies who understood the depths of betrayal. With each conversation, I could feel the weight of my situation lifting. Friends encouraged me to stand strong, reminding me that I was not alone and that my feelings were valid. They shared their own experiences with manipulative relationships, bonding over the shared pain of deceit. It was liberating to connect with others who had faced similar struggles, and with every story, I felt my resolve strengthen. I was more than just a victim in this situation, I was a woman ready to reclaim her narrative. However, as the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I stumbled upon something that sent a chill down my spine. Hidden within the depths of Ethan's old emails, I found messages between him and Samantha that revealed a deeper layer of their conspiracy. They spoke of plans that involved my dream car, discussions about how to keep me in the dark while they plotted their moves. My heart pounded in my chest as I read their exchanges, the betrayal cutting deeper than I thought possible. It was as if a fog had lifted, revealing the true nature of my husband's loyalty. This wasn't just about a car, it was about trust, about the very foundation of our marriage. The realization hit me like a tidal wave, washing over me with a mix of disbelief and anger. Ethan had not only betrayed my trust but had also allowed himself to be manipulated by Samantha. I could feel the walls closing in around me, but instead of succumbing to despair, I felt a surge of empowerment. I was ready to confront the truth, to expose the deceit that had festered in the shadows. I would no longer be a pawn in their game, I was determined to reclaim my life and my dreams. Fueled by the evidence I had gathered and the support of those who cared about me, I resolved to take action. I would not let this be the end of my story. I was ready to fight back, to stand up for myself and for anyone else who had been hurt by Samantha's manipulations. The time for silence was over, this was my moment to rise. The air was thick with tension as I faced Ethan, the evidence I had gathered clutched tightly in my hands. Each paper felt like a heavy weight, pressing down on me, amplifying the betrayal that coursed through my veins. I had meticulously documented Samantha's lies, her manipulations, the way she had treated not just me but the very foundation of our lives. I had expected anger, or perhaps disbelief, but what I received was a defensive posture that made my stomach twist. Ethan's eyes darted between the papers and my face, confusion etched across his features. I could see the gears turning in his mind, but he was stuck in a fog of loyalty to his sister that I could not penetrate. He had chosen her side without hesitation, and that realization stung more than the betrayal itself. It was as though a mirror had been placed in front of me, reflecting a man I no longer recognized. The man who had once promised to stand by me, to value my dreams, now stood in defense of the woman who had orchestrated my heartache. As I watched him argue his points, I felt a fire ignite within me, fueled by the weight of his misplaced loyalty. It was not just about the car anymore, it was about trust, respect, and the realization that I had been living in a facade of a partnership. Each rationalization he offered only served to deepen my resolve. This was not a matter of familial obligation, this was a betrayal of our marriage, an erosion of the very foundation upon which we had built our lives together. I could feel the walls of our home closing in around me, the very structure that had once represented safety and love now felt suffocating, tainted by his allegiance to Samantha. With each word he spoke, I could see Samantha's shadow looming over us, her manipulations wrapping around him like a vine, squeezing out any sense of reason. In that moment, I realized that to reclaim my life, I could not just confront Samantha. I needed to expose her, to unearth the lies she had spun and the web of deceit she had cast around Ethan and our marriage. After our confrontation, I took a step back to collect my thoughts, my heart racing with a mix of anger and determination. I started to channel my fury into something constructive. With the help of friends who understood my plight, I devised a plan, a social media campaign that would shine a light on Samantha's deceptive practices. I gathered stories and testimonies, painting a vivid picture of a woman who had exploited not just me but the trust of an entire community. As I clicked through the images and stories, my resolve crystallized. I was not just fighting for my dream car, I was fighting for my dignity, my identity, and my right to not be used as a pawn in someone else's game. The thrill of reclaiming my narrative surged within me, replacing the feelings of hopelessness with empowerment. Every post shared, every comment made, felt like a small victory, a step closer to unmasking the truth. Days turned into a whirlwind of activity as the campaign gained momentum. I watched as the community began to take notice, conversations sparked from my revelations. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction as more and more people began to question the legitimacy of Samantha's business practices. The once bustling store that had seemed like a fortress of deceit began to show signs of vulnerability. Customers started to pull back, wary of where their support was truly going. With every passing day, I felt the weight of betrayal shift, transforming into a sense of liberation. This was my fight, and I was winning. I no longer felt like a victim. I was reclaiming my agency, stepping into my power, and redefining what it meant to be Amelia. As I sat at my desk, scrolling through the interactions on my posts, I could see the narrative shifting, and with it, my sense of self-worth was rekindled. Though the journey ahead was uncertain, I knew one thing: I would not be defined by Ethan's choices or Samantha's manipulations. I was taking the reins of my life back, and I would not stop until the truth was out there for everyone to see. The atmosphere in our home had shifted. The vibrant energy that once filled the air was now replaced by a heavy silence, thick with tension. I could feel the weight of Ethan's gaze upon me as I continued my campaign against his sister. The anger that had fueled my initial actions began to morph into something more profound, an unwavering resolve. I was no longer just fighting for my dream car, I was reclaiming my identity, a part of myself that had been buried under layers of betrayal and manipulation. Every day brought new challenges, yet I felt invigorated by the support I received from friends and allies. My social media campaign had gained traction, and whispers about Samantha's deceitful practices began to circulate through our community. With each passing day, I could sense the walls of her facade crumbling. I reveled in the thought of her carefully constructed image dissolving like mist under the sun. I found myself smiling, not just at the thought of her impending downfall, but because I was rediscovering who I was, an independent woman who wouldn't be silenced or sidelined. When Ethan confronted me, the tension reached a boiling point. His demands for me to stop, for me to revert to the complacent wife he had always known, only fueled my determination. How could he not see the truth? How could he still defend her? I stood firm, a pillar of strength in a storm of confusion and anger. I wanted to scream at him, to shake him awake from the spell Samantha had cast over him. But I didn't. Instead, I took a deep breath, grounding myself in the knowledge that I was fighting for more than just myself. I was fighting for anyone who had ever felt powerless. The day of the town meeting arrived, and with it, a sense of purpose washed over me. I had gathered evidence and support, ready to expose Samantha's deceit in front of our community. As I entered the hall, the air was electric, filled with murmurs of anticipation. I could see Samantha at the front, her confident demeanor masking the uncertainty that I knew lurked beneath. The sight of her sent a rush of adrenaline through me. I was about to confront the woman who had tried to ruin my life, and I felt a thrill of empowerment. As the meeting began, I listened intently to Samantha's presentation. She spoke with fervor, painting a picture of a thriving business and a bright future. But I could see the cracks in her armor, the forced smile that betrayed her desperation. When my turn finally came, I stood up, my heart racing. The eyes of the community were on me, filled with curiosity and concern. I took a deep breath, steadied my shaking hands, and began to speak. I unveiled the evidence I had meticulously gathered: documents, messages, testimonies from those who had fallen prey to her manipulations. Each word I spoke felt like a strike against the web of deceit she had spun around us. Gasps echoed through the room as I recounted how she had manipulated Ethan, how her greed had blinded him to the truth. The murmurs of disbelief grew louder, the atmosphere shifting from curiosity to shock. I saw the faces of friends, neighbors, and acquaintances transform as they began to understand the extent of her dishonesty. The moment I concluded, I could see the impact of my words ripple through the crowd. Samantha's confident facade shattered, revealing the panic and anger beneath. The room buzzed with energy, disbelief mingling with outrage. I felt a surge of triumph, a sweet taste of victory against the woman who had tried to use my husband as a pawn in her game. As the meeting continued, I knew that the fallout from my revelations would be swift and severe for Samantha. No longer would she be able to hide behind her charm and manipulation. I was finally free from the shadows she had cast over my life, and as I looked around the room, I could see I was not alone. The community stood with me, ready to confront the truth and reclaim their own narratives. I had ignited a spark, and I was determined to see it through to the end. The aftermath of the town meeting felt like a storm had swept through the small town, leaving chaos in its wake. As I walked through the streets, the weight of what had just happened settled heavily on my shoulders. Samantha's store, once a beacon of her ambition, was now on the brink of collapse. Investors were pulling out, and whispers of her deceit echoed around me like the chime of distant church bells. I could almost taste the bitterness of her defeat, and it felt strangely empowering. Ethan had been quiet since the meeting, his expression a mixture of disbelief and confusion. I had seen the moment he began to question his loyalty to Samantha. It was as if a veil had been lifted from his eyes. Yet, despite this flicker of clarity, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still trapped in the web of his sister's manipulations. I felt a mix of pity and anger towards him. How could he have allowed himself to be so easily swayed? For so long, he had been her pawn, and I had been the one left in the shadows. The following day, I drove past the store on my way to work, and it was a pitiful sight. The once vibrant display windows were now dull, the lights flickering intermittently like a dying star. I parked my car, my dream car, the one Samantha's hands had never touched, and took a moment to breathe. The air was thick with the scent of impending rain, and a part of me felt that nature itself was mourning the collapse of her empire. I could imagine the internal turmoil Samantha must be feeling, but my heart was no longer inclined to sympathize. In the depths of my thoughts, I spotted Ethan standing outside the store. He was pacing, running a hand through his hair as he muttered to himself. I felt a pang of sadness for him, but it quickly morphed into righteous indignation. How could he still stand by her after everything? As I approached, I could see the frustration etched on his face, the realization dawning that he had been used as a shield for her deceit. But I was done with the games, done being the one to pick up the pieces of his sister's mess. I stepped into the store, my heart pounding with a mix of defiance and exhilaration. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and Samantha's once vibrant personality seemed to have evaporated. She stood behind the counter, her gaze sharp and accusatory. It was as if she were a cornered animal, ready to lash out. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, and I knew this was my moment. I confronted her, my voice steady and unwavering. Her twisted smile faded as I laid bare the truth of her manipulations. She began to unravel, her facade cracking under the weight of her own lies. I could see the anger boiling within her, but I was no longer afraid. I had reclaimed my power, my voice, and I was ready to take back what was rightfully mine. As the confrontation escalated, the door swung open, and Ethan stepped inside. The look on his face turned from confusion to horror as he realized the magnitude of the scene unfolding before him. I could feel the tension in the air, it was electric. Samantha's rage directed towards Ethan was palpable, and for a brief moment, I felt like a spectator in my own life. But I was done being a background character. I demanded my dream car back, the one that had been taken from me without a second thought. Samantha's eyes narrowed, and I could see the gears turning in her mind, calculating her next move. But I stood my ground, refusing to back down. In a dramatic showdown, I reclaimed my car right there in front of her, the symbol of my independence and resilience. As I slid into the driver's seat, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. The engine roared to life, and I glanced back at Ethan and Samantha, their expressions a mix of shock and defeat. As I drove away, the weight I had carried for too long began to lift. The road stretched out before me, and with each passing mile, I felt freer, lighter. In my rearview mirror, I could see the store fading into the distance, a relic of a life that no longer defined me. Ethan's desperate voice floated through my mind, pleading for forgiveness. But I knew I could not go back. My journey of self-discovery had just begun, and I was ready to embrace a future where I was the author of my own story. I smiled confidently, the horizon ahead filled with possibilities, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive.